For the past 40 years, I was the one who kept the Walker household breathing. I ran the upholstery factory my father left me, handled payroll, suppliers, debts, expansions, and disputes. While my husband, Ethan Walker, devoted himself to writing that never paid, never fed anyone. Never kept the lights on, but which he insisted would one day make him immortal. He liked to sit by the window with a notebook and talk about ideals, about dignity, about how money was beneath real thinkers. I liked to stand on concrete floors until my feet went numb and calculate whether we could afford another month of wages. I was 30 when we married, already known in town as capable and sharp, already labeled to calculating for a woman. Ethan said he didn't mind. He said he admired it. What he really meant was that it made his life easy. When he fell sick at 68, his body failing faster than his pride, I took time off work for the first time in decades to sit beside his bed. On the last night of his life, while machines hummed and his breathing rattled like something broken inside a wall, he didn't look at me. He clutched a small pressed daisy sealed in resin, something I had never seen before, and whispered a name over and over, like a confession he had rehearsed for years. Claire. I waited for him to correct himself. I waited for him to say my name even once. He never did. When our daughter leaned over and asked him who Claire was, he smiled with a peace I had never given him and said, "The one I loved before life taught me to settle." After the funeral, our daughter compiled Ethan's journals, essays, and letters into a book. She titled it "The Man Who Loved Too Purely." It sold well enough to circulate online, and strangers cried over his tragedy. They praised his restraint, his loyalty, the way he sacrificed true love for duty. They condemned the woman who had trapped him in a life of mediocrity. My daughter read the comments to me while I lay in a hospital bed, organs failing after decades of exhaustion I had never complained about. "Dad suffered so much," she said quietly. "You should try to see it from his perspective." I stared at the ceiling and wondered how a person could live in a house built by someone else and still believe they were the one imprisoned. I died that night without arguing, because I finally understood that nothing I said would ever count as much as the love story they had invented without me. When I opened my eyes again, the smell of fabric glue and dust filled my lungs. My hands were young, no tremor, no stiffness. Outside, the radio played a song from the late 1980s. I was 30 again. It was the day a private investor came to discuss buying my factory. In my previous life, I had refused, convinced expansion was the only way to secure Ethan's future so he could write in peace. That decision chained me to 40 years of labor and a deathbed where my name meant nothing. This time, when the investor slid the contract across the table, I didn't hesitate. I signed it cleanly, calmly, and felt something inside me loosen for the first time. That evening, Ethan reacted exactly as he had before: shocked, angry, patronizing. He accused me of short-sightedness, of ruining our future, of valuing money over meaning. I watched him talk and realized something chillingly clear. Ethan had never once believed my work was meaning. It was just infrastructure. A foundation he never thanked. 3 days later, a letter arrived. I recognized the handwriting instantly, though I had never seen it before in this life. Claire. Ethan hid it badly, like a child hiding sweets, and his mood shifted overnight. He woke early. He cleaned. He cooked. Our daughter, still young, still unshaped, watched him and asked the question that had broken me in my last life. "Dad, if you hadn't married Mom, would you have married Claire instead?" he told her to lower her voice. He didn't deny it. When Claire arrived with a single suitcase and a fragile smile, Ethan treated her like a guest of honor. He told me she would stay a few days. I smiled and nodded and began quietly moving money, documents, and assets into my name alone. By the time Ethan realized I was serious about leaving, The house no longer felt like mine. He accused me of jealousy, of bitterness, of sabotaging his happiness. Claire stood behind him, eyes downcast, but lips pressed in quiet triumph. Our daughter cried and begged me not to destroy the family. I told them nothing. I left before dawn with a suitcase and no intention of ever returning to a life where my labor was invisible and my presence resented. The city did not care who I used to be married to. It cared that I worked hard, learned fast, and delivered results. I found work immediately. I rented a small apartment. I slept deeply for the first time in years. Ethan followed me weeks later, thinner, angrier, pride already cracking. He demanded I come home. He said our daughter needed me. He said he couldn't write without peace. I looked at him and felt nothing. When he said, "You always knew your role," I finally laughed. I told him that roles end when the audience walks out. News from my hometown arrived slowly. Claire left once money ran out. Ethan struggled without someone managing his life. Our daughter learned hunger was not poetic. Years later, when I returned briefly for paperwork, I saw Ethan wandering near the factory gates, muttering lines no one listened to anymore. He looked at me like I was salvation. I looked at him like he was a chapter 1 had already closed. I did not expect Ethan to unravel so quickly, though perhaps that was only because I had spent one lifetime holding him upright. Without my labor smoothing his path, without my quiet management shielding him from consequences, his so-called dignity collapsed faster than his health ever had. At first, he told people I had abandoned him out of spite, that I was cold, materialistic, incapable of understanding love. He framed himself as a tragic artist betrayed by a calculating wife, and for a while, some people believed him. Pity is cheap, and Ethan had always known how to sell it. But pity does not pay rent, and admiration does not buy groceries. The factory workers I had trained and treated fairly did not answer his calls. Suppliers who had once extended credit out of respect for me demanded cash up front. Editors stopped responding when his emails turned desperate, rambling, and accusatory. Claire had already vanished by then, leaving behind nothing but a note thanking him for reminding her why she had left town in the first place. Ethan tore that note up and told anyone who would listen that she had been frightened away by my cruelty, as if I were still somehow responsible for every disappointment in his life. Our daughter came to the city one winter afternoon, her coat too thin, her pride still intact but cracking at the edges. She was angry when she arrived, angry at me for leaving, angry at him for failing, angry at the world for not matching the story she had grown up believing. We sat across from each other in a cafe, steam rising from untouched cups, and she accused me of being heartless. She said I had known about Claire and stayed anyway, that I had chosen a loveless marriage and then punished everyone else for it. I listened without interrupting, because I had learned that silence can be more devastating than argument. When she finished, breathless and red-eyed, I asked her a single question. "Do you know how much your father earned last year?" She didn't. I asked how much the house cost to maintain, how tuition had been paid, who had arranged the medical care when he fell ill the first time. She stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. For the first time, I watched the story she loved begin to fracture under the weight of facts. She left without apologizing, but she didn't look back with hatred either. She looked confused. Confusion, I had learned, was the beginning of truth. Ethan's decline stopped being private when he decided it should be public. He filed a lawsuit claiming entitlement to assets he had never earned, citing emotional contribution, intellectual labor, and marital sacrifice. Reading the complaint, I felt something close to amusement. In my previous life, I would have panicked, compromised, softened the blow. This time, I answered him in court. I presented contracts, financial records, witness testimony. I let his words hang in the air while mine landed with documents and dates. When he stood up and spoke about love, about inspiration, about how my practicality had suffocated his soul. The judge asked him a simple question: "Can you show me where your name appears on any revenue stream?" He could not. His face twisted, not with grief, but with outrage that the world would not validate his feelings as currency. He lost the case. He lost publicly. The articles that followed were not kind. The tragic artist narrative soured quickly when confronted with numbers. After that, Ethan began showing up where I was not invited him. Outside my office. At professional events. Once, embarrassingly, at a conference where he attempted to read from his unpublished manuscript during the Q&A, insisting the audience needed to hear the truth of his suffering. Security escorted him out while people stared, not with sympathy, but with discomfort. I watched from a distance, not intervening, not rescuing. In my first life, I would have smoothed things over, apologized on his behalf, absorbed the humiliation so he wouldn't have to. This time, I let it belong to him. Our daughter cut contact with him slowly, painfully, one disappointment at a time. He borrowed money and didn't repay it. He promised change and didn't follow through. He blamed her for being ungrateful when she asked him to find stable work. One night, she called me crying, saying she didn't understand how love could feel so heavy. I told her something I had never said before: love that demands your life in exchange for someone else's comfort is not love. It is consumption. She was quiet for a long time after that. When she spoke again, her voice was different, less romantic, more grounded. She didn't ask me to come back. She asked me how I had survived. Years passed. I aged naturally this time, not prematurely. I advanced, invested, learned, traveled. I built friendships that did not require self-erasure. I learned what it felt like to rest without guilt. Sometimes, late at night, I thought about the woman I had been, the one who died quietly, convinced she was unreasonable for wanting to be seen. I wished I could reach back through time and tell her that endurance is not virtue when it is demanded by people who give nothing in return. The last time I saw Ethan, it was entirely by accident. He was sitting on a bench near the old factory grounds, now converted into offices and studios, holding a notebook with shaking hands. He looked smaller, shrunken not just by age, but by irrelevance. He looked up when I passed, recognition flickering into something like hope. He started to stand, then hesitated, as if unsure whether he was allowed. I stopped a few steps away. He said my name like it was a question. He said he finally understood. He said he had been blind, selfish, afraid. He asked if it was too late. I considered him carefully, not with anger, not with pity, but with clarity. I told him that understanding after the cost has been paid is not redemption, it is bookkeeping. I told him I had already lived a version of life where I forgave him, and it had killed me. This life, I said, was not built to accommodate his regrets. He cried then, openly, without dignity, and for the first time I felt certain that walking away was not cruelty. It was alignment. I left him there, notebook unopened, words finally trapped where they belonged. When I walked home, the city lights felt warm instead of harsh. I cooked dinner for myself and ate slowly. I slept without dreaming of debt or disappointment. I had not destroyed a family. I had refused to be erased by one. And in doing so, I had rewritten the only story that truly mattered, the one where I lived, fully, without apology, and without carrying anyone who mistook my strength for obligation.